The first sign that something was wrong with the sky above the Atacama Desert wasn't the light. It was the silence. I was standing outside the mobile observatory just before dawn, coffee cooling in my hand, when the wind stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The desert, usually restless even in the early hours, became unnaturally still. No insects. No distant aircraft. Even the low hum from the station's generators seemed to fade, as if the sound itself had been absorbed. Then the stars shifted. Not in the poetic way astronomers like to talk about, but in a way that made my stomach drop. One moment they were fixed, ancient, reliable. The next, a cluster near the southern horizon bent inward, warping like reflections on disturbed water. I dropped the coffee. "Control," I said into my wrist calm, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you seeing this?" Static. That was when the light came, not blinding, not explosive, but precise. A vertical seam opened in the sky, as if reality itself had been unzipped. Pale blue energy poured out, silent and smooth, touching down less than a kilometer from the observatory. Every alarm I had began screaming at once. I didn't run. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe shock. Or maybe some part of me understood that whatever was happening wasn't going to be stopped by fear. I grabbed my recorder, my jacket, and headed toward the light. The object wasn't a ship. At least, not in any way that fit our definitions. It hovered a meter above the sand, a shape that refused to settle into geometry. Smooth surfaces folded into themselves, edges blurring, as if it existed half a second ahead of the present. The air around it vibrated, not with heat, but with tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. And then it opened. No doors, no ramps, just a soft separation, like hands parting water. She stepped out. She looked human enough to be unsettling. 2 arms, 2 legs, upright posture, but her movements were too controlled, too deliberate, as if gravity were something she negotiated with rather than obeyed. Her skin held a faint luminescence, not glowing exactly, but reflecting light in ways that didn't match the sun's angle. Her eyes, God, her eyes, were deep and dark, yet filled with shifting points of light, like stars seen through water. She looked directly at me. "You are the observer," she said. Her voice didn't travel through the air so much as appear in my mind, layered with harmonics I couldn't process. "I'm a scientist," I replied, because when faced with the impossible, honesty felt like the only sane response. She tilted her head slightly. "Then you will understand why I am here." My recorder was shaking in my hand. "Who are you?" I asked. She paused, as if considering how much truth I could survive. "My name," she said, "would mean nothing to you, but my role might. I am what you would call a custodian." "Of what?" I asked. She looked past me, toward the distant line of Earth's curve. "Of timelines." By the time the authorities arrived, it was already too late to hide her existence. Satellites had recorded the event. Civilian telescopes had picked up the distortion. Social media was already ablaze with speculation, alien invasion, divine visitation, experimental weapons. She waited calmly as soldiers formed a cautious perimeter around us, their weapons useless and, I suspected, irrelevant. They tried to communicate. She listened politely. Then she asked for me. Specifically. "I need the observer," she said. "The one who was watching before I arrived." That's how I found myself sitting across from an extraterrestrial being in a hastily erected command tent, while generals and scientists argued in whispers behind reinforced glass. "My name is Daniel Cade, astrophysicist. No special clearance. No classified projects. Just someone who spent his life watching the universe and asking questions it never answered. Until now. Why Earth? I asked her once we were alone. Because Earth is unstable, she replied. That's not news, I said dryly. She regarded me with what I think was curiosity. You misunderstand. Your planet is not politically unstable. Not environmentally unstable. It is causally unstable. I felt a chill. Explain. Your species stands at a convergence point, she said. Multiple future trajectories intersect here. Most civilizations collapse at such points. A few transcend them. A very small number fracture reality itself. You're saying we're dangerous. I am saying you are significant. The implications hit me slowly, like a rising tide. Why tell us now? I asked. Why show up at all? She was silent for a long moment. Because in 17 of the observed futures, she said, humanity ceases to exist within the next 2 centuries. In 4, you destroy far more than yourselves. And the others? She looked at me again. Really looked at me. In 1, she said, you become custodians like us. I swallowed. So, you're here to what? Judge us? No, she said. I am here because in 1 timeline, only 1, you ask for help. I frowned. We didn't. She smiled. Or something close to it. Not yet. Her presence changed everything. Governments scrambled. Religions splintered. Scientists worked non-stop, trying to understand her technology, her biology, her physics-defying existence. She allowed observation, but no experimentation. Boundaries were set. By her, not us. She stayed near the observatory, her vessel anchored to reality, like a needle holding fabric together. And she kept asking for me. Over days that turned into weeks, we talked. About stars. About time. About the nature of intelligence. She explained that her kind did not travel through space the way we did. They navigated probability, choosing paths where outcomes aligned with their purpose. You could have landed anywhere, I said once. Yes, she replied. But this location produced the least fear response in you. I laughed weakly. I think you miscalculated. Fear is not the absence of calm, she said. It is the choice to move forward despite uncertainty. She taught me concepts my mind barely held. How timelines braided, how consciousness influenced probability, how observation itself shaped reality in subtle ways. You watch the universe, she said. You do not try to dominate it. That matters. One night, as we stood beneath the stars, unchanged now, obedient again, I asked the question that had haunted me since her arrival. What is your reason? I said. Why this timeline? She was quiet for a long time. Because I failed, she said. The words stunned me. In 1 iteration, she continued, my people observed a civilization much like yours. Curious. Divided. Brilliant. We chose non-intervention. We watched as they reached their convergence point. And, I asked. And they destroyed themselves, she said, taking 3 neighboring systems with them. Millions of lives across species erased. My throat tightened. You're trying to prevent that from happening again, I said. Yes, she replied. But intervention carries its own risks. Change too much and you remove the very qualities that allow growth. So, why come at all? I asked. Because in this timeline, she said softly, I arrive. And you ask me a question no one else does. I frowned. Which is? She met my eyes. What would you choose if you were us? I stared at her. I never asked that. Not yet, she said again. The world reacted poorly to uncertainty. Pressure mounted to extract more information, more technology. Some factions demanded alliances. Others demanded her removal, by force, if necessary. She warned them. Interference, she explained, would destabilize probability fields. Aggression would narrow future outcomes. They didn't listen. The attempt came at dawn. A classified strike, EMP weapons, experimental containment fields, quantum anchors designed to lock her in place. I was there when it happened, standing too close, shouting into comms that no one answered. The weapons fired. And failed. Reality bent around her like a wave around stone. Energy dispersed. Systems shut down. The sky dimmed briefly, as if the universe itself flinched. She did not retaliate. She turned to me, her expression, if that was what it was, filled with something like sadness. "This is the moment," she said. "What moment?" I asked, heart pounding. "The one where I decide whether to leave," she said. "Or stay." "Stay," I said immediately. "Please." "We can still listen," she interrupted gently. "Your species is not united. You fear what you cannot control. That fear will drive your choices." She gestured toward the soldiers regrouping, the commanders shouting orders. "If I remain," she said, "I become a focal point, a dependency. You will shape your future around me instead of yourselves." "And if you leave?" I asked. "Then you face your convergence alone," she said. "As you must." I felt something break inside me. "There has to be another way," I said. "You said there was a timeline where we ask for help." She nodded. "There is." "Then help us now," I said. "Tell us what to do." She looked at me for a long time. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out, not physically but mentally, and shared something with me. A vision. I saw futures collapse and bloom. Wars avoided by fragile compromises. Technologies guided by ethics instead of profit. Failures that taught instead of destroyed. And at the center of it all, choice. "I cannot save you," she said. "But I can give you one thing." "What?" I whispered. "Perspective," she replied. When she left, it was quiet. No light. No distortion. Just a subtle reweaving of the sky, like a scar fading. She was gone. The world reeled. Some called it abandonment. Others called it mercy. As for me, I was left with knowledge I couldn't fully articulate and responsibility I hadn't asked for. I spent months debriefing, testifying, arguing with people who wanted answers I couldn't simplify. But one question followed me everywhere. Why me? The answer came years later, when humanity stood at the edge of its convergence point, when decisions about artificial consciousness, planetary engineering, and interstellar expansion threatened to fracture us beyond repair. I stood before a global council, older, more tired, and finally understood. She didn't come to save us, I told them. She came to see if we would save ourselves. They listened. Some agreed. Some didn't. But enough did. Enough to change the trajectory. Decades later, as humanity took its first careful steps beyond its home system, not as conquerors, but as observers, I returned to the desert where it had all begun. The sky was quiet, the stars steady, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day she arrived. Hope. Because somewhere out there, a custodian was watching. Not to judge, but to see if we had learned the reason she came.